How long will it take, and through which means, for Italy to compensate for the decline in exports and/or industrial margins toward the United States, due to tariffs, as well as toward other regions affected by geopolitical barriers, by finding geoeconomic alternatives? The issue is pressing because, on a macro level, Italy lacks the capacity to replace its export-led model with one based on increased domestic consumption, both due to the configuration of its production system and to constraints on fiscal space, caused by debt servicing, which limits competitive investments and tax relief, as well as due to excessively low wages. The scenario analysis currently circulating among various research centers is painting a more problematic picture than a few months ago. My research group concurs. However, after a preliminary probabilistic projection in economic geopolitics assessing the strengths and weaknesses of Italian exports, we hypothesized a best-case scenario indicating a 3-year timeframe for replacing exports to the United States with additional global growth. This best-case scenario is supported both by data showing Italy's feverish activity in signing strategic bilateral agreements globally to support industrial partnerships, and by the intense search by companies for alternative markets. Nevertheless, this scenario remains conditional. The main conditions, setting aside here the necessary limitation of armed conflicts in terms of their intensity and global impact, a variable to be defined in the coming months, are the success of the aforementioned bilateral partnerships, with particular attention to Africa, and the success of free trade agreements, which fall under EU jurisdiction and are being strongly promoted by Germany, which faces the same export dependency as Italy, though with greater fiscal space for propulsive investments. It is worth noting that the EU treaties with Canada and Japan have provided a significant advantage to Italian exports. This suggests the additional inclusion of a strategic bilateral agreement, not commercial, as that falls under EU competence, but industrial, with potentially even greater effects, between Rome and Tokyo, extending the agreement on the GCAP aerial platform, with the United Kingdom, and between Rome and Ottawa, which has recently signaled a desire for stronger European ties. An important condition would be to agree on limiting excessive competition among EU exporting nations in exchange for mutually contributive convergences, where each supports the others, fostering inter-European industrial integration capacities, for example, the recent one in the space sector. Italy's priority is to find convergences for the initial construction of a Mediterranean market with Italian centrality, supported by America and other European nations. Preliminary work is underway in this direction, and I hope the new economic unit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs aims to consolidate this strategic vector, a precursor to coordinated European expansions, now in preparation, toward Mercosur, Australia, Indonesia, and above all, India. On this point, the convergence or at least non-opposition of the United States will be important, and I consider it possible, as Washington is increasingly realizing its need for European allies and a G7+. It remains to be seen how many Italian companies will decide to establish branches in the United States, but data will only be available in about a year. Data on Italian industrial migration attracted by the reshoring program and incentives of the previous Biden administration show minimal flow. For this reason as well, the hypothesis of a predominant search for alternative global export markets by Italian companies within a 3-year horizon remains likely.